And today what we're talking about is Ethereum's migration from a proof-of-work mining model to a consensus mechanism known as proof of stake. Now, this is an effort that is years in the making, and it is set to take effect in either Q2 or Q3. Now, here to help me break down what that transition will look like are three experts. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Go for it, guys.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Stokes. I'm with the Ethereum Foundation doing some research, but also like prototyping and various development efforts to get all of this research that we'll probably talk about with the history of the merge and things into a place where like client teams, for example, with Cayman and Preston can implement things.
Great.
Hey guys, my name is Cayman Nava. I'm with ChainSafe. I'm working on a consensus client for Ethereum and working to get the merge done this year. So.
Great. And Preston?
Hey guys, I'm Preston Van Loon. I work at Prysmatic Labs, and we're also building consensus layer client software for Ethereum.
Cool. Okay, let's get right into it. So a couple weeks ago, the Ethereum Foundation said, hey, we're not calling it ETH1, ETH2. There's no Ethereum 2.0. I wanted to know what is behind that rebrand, and has everyone adopted that? So who wants to kick us off?
I can give a short little overview because, so yeah, I mean, kind of like you hinted, there's like a lot of history here. There's like been a many year effort in terms of research and also development to get to where we are today. And I would say this like ETH1, ETH2 thing came from a place where, you know, maybe, I don't know, even 3 years ago, it was like there's a constellation of things we want to do. There's still like very sort of forward-looking things we want to do. And they're in various sort of degrees of, let's say, production, like in terms of how developed they are, going from just like random ideas to like actually things you could like put into production clients. So anyway, there's this bucket of things of ETH2. At the time, you know, sharding, proof of stake, these things would fall into that bucket. And then it just became clear over time that, you know, we would actually have this sort of merge event. And then when you have that, it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, here's ETH1, here's ETH2. There's one Ethereum. There's a consensus layer, there's an execution layer. There are different layers of the stack, but it's all the sort of the same protocol. So I think it helps people, especially like people who are entering this space now, to not have this like very confusing like, what's ETH 1.0 versus ETH 2.0? Yeah.
Okay, and Preston?
Yeah, so I think a little bit differently. Like, I do agree that there isn't two, you know, things like ETH 1.0, ETH 2.0, but ETH 2.0, it's this effort to upgrade and really change the way Ethereum produces blocks and does consensus. And with that, I still think it's valuable to understand that this is a totally new version of Ethereum that operates completely different from the way Ethereum works. But Alex is right. We don't have ETH1 clients and ETH2 clients, and they're not different. They're actually all working together to operate in this system that I like to think of it as ETH2. I think it's you know, important to communicate that it's a very different paradigm from ETH1 what we have today.
Okay, so.
And one quick comment, I will say, you know, the sort of word ETH2 can be helpful in like technical conversations, you know, in terms of like referring to very specific things. So like, for example, amongst us, it like means something specific. So, you know, there's a place and time.
Okay.
It's easier to say, too.
It is. It's catchy.
Consensus layer is a mouthful.
Okay, so the migration from proof of work to proof of stake, it's not going to happen overnight. So walk us through what that transition looks like. Are we talking about like a couple weeks, a couple months? And yeah. Do you wanna...
Well, yeah. Do you want to hop in?
Yeah, I can kind of get into it. So just the whole kind of idea of how we're going to bring proof of stake to Ethereum had been a very kind of just a hard problem. And over the past year, we got together, all of the core devs got together, and we basically started hashing out exactly what this looked like. And from, I'd say, Q3 through now, we've basically hardened kind of the idea through kind of the prototyping stage all the way to the point where we have several test nets where we're actually deploying and testing this process of switching in a real live network. So what it's going to look like, we're kind of testing that out right now, and we have actual software that's doing that. So we're feeling pretty confident about it.
Alex?
Yeah, well, and I would say, like, I think we have a pretty good idea. Like, we've had long-running dev nets for a while. There's different sort of sprints, if you want to call them that. We just had one for Kintsugi, is like, you know, label for it. We have one now for Kiln, and these basically are referring to iterations of the specs. And maybe it'll be helpful just to like overview that process briefly. Because we have multiple clients on the network, they all need to agree and execute the same thing. The way that we coordinate that in Ethereum is we have specifications. So like when I keep saying specs, this is what I'm referring to. It's like a very, very precise description of what the software should do. And that's, I think, like, well, that's definitely like a huge key piece of like, when merge is like, are those specs in a solid place? And definitely in like the last couple of months, they've gotten to a place where like there's very minimal changes. I pretty much consider them done. And so then from there, you just want to build this stuff out and actually see it run in these testing environments, which is where we're at right now.
And the Beacon chain has been running since December of 2020. And so are we expecting to have like two parallel chains for a while? Like, what does that look like in practice? How long, like how many months does this take to get everybody to the new chain?
Well, so the way it works, right, is that we will have a proof of work chain and a proof of stake chain. And so we have like the mainnet proof of stake chain with the Beacon chain. And then there are also proof of stake test nets. There are also proof of work test nets. And I guess when I'm talking about these testing environments, this is what I mean is that we can basically do some like, dry runs ahead of the actual mainnet merge. And those will happen, those are ongoing and they'll be happening, with sort of more seriousness in the coming months, like 1 to 2 months, like soon, TM.
Well, and the entire idea of the merge is that we've taken the Beacon chain software, we've taken like the ETH1 software, Geth type software, and the solution that we have is basically they're both going to be running alongside each other, but kind of talking together. So from kind of users of Ethereum, like not much is actually going to be changing. Just under the hood, now Geth is talking, or now the execution layer is talking to the Beacon chain, and vice versa.
Okay, now ETH2 is coming as practically a meme at this point. So when is it coming?
When it's ready. I mean, with this kind of thing, like Ethereum is running, it's this massive ecosystem, and we have to make sure it's done right. So these things take a lot of time. There's security we got to think about, and with all these test scenarios, we're trying to, we've got the spec, and we know the happy paths, and we even know some of the bad things that could happen, and we want to make sure that when those things do happen, they happen the right way. But as Alex said and Cayman said, we're really close. We're in the testnet stages now. We're ironing out the bugs, and we're getting really close to having it done.
How can devs prepare for it? Like, what are the main challenges you're anticipating?
Well, I think that there's a lot of different developers in the Ethereum ecosystem. So if you're like a Solidity developer or someone who's using dApps in the ecosystem, there's not really much of a difference in the way that you operate. It's really about how infrastructure operators participate in Ethereum. So if you run your own node, which I encourage you to do, it's really great, helpful for the network. You're going to have to upgrade your software and then run a new piece of software. So Ethereum 1, or now the execution layer, that's what everyone's been running today. And now you're going to have to start running the consensus layer client alongside. So you'll have to run two pieces of software in parallel. They'll be tightly coupled. And that's the new way to do it. So it really only affects infrastructure.
Let's talk about the difficulty time bomb for a minute. We keep pushing that out. Is that like the hard deadline? Like, will that be what finally pushes everybody into this, like to make the migration?
So it just so happens that the one we have right now is pretty auspiciously timed, because I think most people involved, with developing this stuff would say, like you said, Q3 or Q2 timeline for the merge. And that's when the next difficulty bomb will start going off, right? And it'll increase and increase.
How are we going to pull data? Does it change? And if so, how does it change?
Yeah, so I guess like Preston was saying, like the intention of the sort of design of the merge is to like have as little change as possible. So if you're a developer sort of at the application layer, there should be very little change. If you're an infrastructure provider running nodes, there will be some new things you need to do, but also it shouldn't be, it's not an ask beyond what you're really already doing. And then there's different, that's kind of a broad question, but there's a lot of different ways that data will be available.
Thanks for bearing with me through that question. That was pretty broad. Okay, let's talk about what this enables. Like, what's next? Like, once this goes into effect, like, what is possible?
Right, so the merge definitely sets the stage for all of the future Ethereum developments. I'd say like right now there's like two fires in the Ethereum house. One is this proof of work to proof of stake switch, and everyone is focused on that right now. But I think the next phase is going to be scalability and making sure that this can scale to like global commerce.
Anything else, Alex? Preston?
I think Cayman said it well. I don't have much to add to that.
Yeah. Okay, so when you talk about proof of stake, sometimes people will say like, hey, you got the problem of centralization. Now, I assume that we haven't been building a system that, whales could take over. So how do you work around that? How do you brace for that? Any thoughts?
There are a number of ways. Sort of one obvious option is like the existence of staking pools. So what that will do is lower the barrier to entry in terms of capital requirements. Instead of needing a 32 ETH deposit for a validator, you and 30 friends could put together 1 and some change ETH and run this thing. Then, yeah, again, we could spend the rest of the time talking about this topic in particular, but essentially, proof of stake does not necessarily lead to increased centralization. There's a number of ways that it sort of, works against that, especially in Ethereum. One thing, for example, is that the return you get on your sort of, your stake as a validator is constant regardless of your size. Another one is that we have incentives and sort of, designs in the protocol that actually incentivize anti-correlation, meaning like there are incentives in the protocol such that you shouldn't centralize in various ways, which again, that's a very big word. But yeah, so bottom line is it's when people say that, it's pretty much FUD.
So why did it take so long to happen? Like, was it harder than anticipated? Did challenges come up along the way? Ooh.
So a big thing is that Ethereum, like a core value of the ecosystem is like working in public and open source and all this. And so what that means is that anyone can literally see, quote, how the sausage is made. Like it's all transparent on the internet. And that's the thing where I think people have just been following it so long, right? There's so much excitement around what we're doing with Ethereum and the potential that it's very exciting and engaging. And then you dig in and you're like, well, wait, okay, there's so much, it seems like noise. And part of that is just how we aggregate as a community. We do have this ethos of decentralization. And so sometimes that can look chaotic. But again, we do it for a reason. And the reason is that, it leads to a more robust community over time.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, research just takes time, and like Alex is saying, it's all open. So having more contributors in, we get better opinions. And many times over the course of the years of developing this software, we've had to almost start over from scratch. At Prysmatic Labs, we were one of the first people to get into it, and we have, I think, rewritten our whole code base at least 3 times. And that's just sort of the way it goes with this kind of technology where once it's deployed out there, it's really difficult to change, and it's really difficult to ask operators to upgrade their software. So we try the best we can to get it right the first time. Of course, we want to upgrade and change things as time goes on, but it's research, and it's really important to get it right.
Yeah. Now, there were incremental steps taken in the last 9 months. I think about the London hard fork in August, Altair in October. Are there other smaller incremental updates that'll happen before the bigger transition takes effect? Or anything to look out for?
Yeah, I don't see any. Definitely everyone right now is very focused on the merge. For some reason the merge wouldn't happen before the difficulty bomb starts going off, then we'd have to consider a fork to adjust that. But yeah, I think already we're considering, what happens after the merge and planning for that fork, codenamed Shanghai.
Vitalik tweeted a couple weeks ago that we should be careful about bridging between chains. We saw a wormhole happen. Do you think our future is multi-chain, or any thoughts on that?
So I think the current roadmap for Ethereum, we're going to be seeing a lot of competition and collaboration between a lot of L2s on Ethereum. And so in some way that's, you can think of them as their own separate chains. So I think in that sense, there's definitely, it's going to be interesting to see a lot of the experimentation around that come into the real world. So with Arbitrum, Optimism, and even really kind of experimental optimistic rollups like Fuel Labs, and it'll be really interesting to see.
Right, and so, this is all just trade-offs, and so there's always going to be applications where it'll make sense to consider having like a separate chain, right? Like you can be on Ethereum where it's almost general purpose and like all the activity is, or you could be on a different chain and then you lose sort of this network effect, but what you gain is like the ability to like precisely sculpt your protocol to whatever your application is. I think there will always be like mini chains, like there's no reason there wouldn't be, but a big question will be security.
A big question you said is security?
Exactly, yeah. Well, yeah, I think did you mention the wormhole hack?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great example where like there was this bridge between Solana and Ethereum and like there was a bug. Part of this is that it's super early and just in terms of the whole space, right? Like there will be bugs, the software will be hardened over time, but it's still kind of the Wild West. And yeah, because of the way these things work, like if you have sort of the security of the proof of stake chain with the beacon chain, right, that doesn't necessarily transfer over to a separate domain, vis-a-vis some other chain. And so until we sort of like harden these bridges, it's always going to be, there'll always be some risk.
So you see articles talking about the so-called the rival blockchains that are perhaps like faster or cheaper. There are obviously trade-offs that come with that. So do you have any thoughts on like a Solana as a competitor and how the migration might change that dynamic, or what does that express?
No. I mean, I have plenty of thoughts. I don't know. It's like one thing here is that when people ask me these sorts of questions, I think they view this as almost like they view blockchains as like products that are competing in almost like the Web 2 sense, if we'll pull that terminology in. And that's not what we're doing here. Like these are protocols, and that actually means something like pretty distinct and different. That's all I'll say for that. I mean, generally, I want to view things as positive somewhere I can, and like to the extent that we can collaborate with like other ecosystems, that's great. For example, there's a number of like research that we've done between Ethereum and like Filecoin and others I'm blanking on, but basically, I think there's a lot of we all realize that broadly in crypto, we're all working towards like shared goals, so it makes sense to collaborate.
Let's talk about the environmental impact of proof of stake versus proof of work.
Yeah, I mean, proof of work is really expensive computational, right? The way it works is that we have machines all around the world that are computing hashes and trying to solve this puzzle basically, and it's really energy inexpensive. So when switching to proof of stake, where it's just a fraction of the amount of energy, almost to the degree you could run it on like a cell phone or something of that caliber, it's going to have an enormous impact on reduction of the environmental impact that Ethereum has.
Right, you're going from data centers full of machines to a Raspberry Pi, basically.
Anything else you want to add?
I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, definitely, yeah. Like, it's just sort of like a paradigm shift, to use that phrase, going from proof of work to proof of stake in terms of energy consumption. And I mean, I think definitely broadly with the Ethereum community, we all think this is like an important thing to pursue. So it definitely motivates the merge, and would bias us towards doing something sooner rather than later, as we're doing.
I mean, presumably by like ETH Denver 2023, this will have gone through, will be smooth sailing. So what is the hottest topic going to be next year at the same conference?
With respect to the protocol, probably sharding. This is like the next big upgrade we'd have planned. So there's sort of this trifecta of things we can think about in terms of improving the Ethereum protocol, security, sustainability, and scalability. And the move to proof of stake gives us kind of the first two, and then the next big one is like scaling the actual chain. So you want to have sort of larger capacity at the base layer, and sharding is sort of this high-level bucket, sort of group of techniques to achieve this.
Hot topic 2023.
Yeah, I mean, sharding would definitely be the big topic, and then adding more layer 2s. So the next level of scaling for Ethereum is in layer 2. A lot of the people on the research side and deep in the protocol, we've kind of agreed that Ethereum as we know it today is going to be more of a settlement layer, and all of the user activity is going to be moving to layer 2s. So with design patterns like sharding, we have more capacity for even more layer 2 solutions. So I think that's what we're really going to be talking about and thinking about is how we're scaling with layer 2 next year.
Cayman, anything else we'll add in?
One thing about that we haven't really touched on the merge is kind of the monetary side, which I think is really interesting. just from thinking about like the financial bandwidth that Ethereum allows right now. So we're actually going to be cutting issuance when we do the merge. So we're really overpaying miners right now, or overpaying for security. We're paying miners, and when we get rid of these miners, we're going to be reducing issuance, kind of almost like a Bitcoin halvening of sorts, but kind of like 3 halvenings at once, like a triple halvening. And so that's just going to be a really interesting thing to see play out. Like I don't know what that's going to look like, but something that people should know.
Yeah, with that, Ethereum actually becomes deflationary on issuance. So it's really great for the protocol. We've been issuing, overpaying for security for so long, and now with these new mechanisms, we'll see deflationary. So there will be, we'll see at some point, I think next year, or after the merge rather, we'll know what the true max cap of Ethereum will be, because at this time it's unbounded, but after the merge, we'll know.
Have you guys been talking
Also
to
MEV, one more thing.
Yeah,
We'll all
yeah.
be talking about MEV.
Wait, say again?
We'll all be talking about MEV.
Have you guys talked to any of the Ethereum proof of work miners? Like, are they just all starting to migrate to mining other things? Are they getting into the proof of stake model? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because basically the proposition is, hey, you've had this like line of revenue for so many years, and we're going to suddenly get rid of it. That being said, like this is not a surprise. Maybe it's taken far longer than anyone wanted, but you know, from the very early days, like this has been a core part of the Ethereum vision to have this move to proof of stake. So I think to that extent, it like de-risk a lot in terms of like miners being upset or something. A lot of them are like, yeah, like we'll mine other things, get rid of our mining hardware, figure something out. In the meantime, they've already started spinning up staking arms, and yeah, they're essentially prepared for their transition.
Okay. We have like a couple minutes left. Are we taking audience questions, or do you guys yeah, there is a mic. If you have anything, please come up. All right, we got somebody running to the mic.
Okay, is this on? Okay. So my question is about client diversity in Ethereum 2.0. So for example, I've been running my Prism node, and I recently switched to Nimbus. So sorry, Preston. So I think many of us believe that client diversity is one of the core strengths, of Ethereum, of the Beacon chain. So my question is, how do you think about this off-chain Beacon chain governance? How can we develop this kind of mechanisms to prevent maybe a consensus bug? What would happen if there would be a consensus bug on Prism, for example? So I guess that's my question. Client diversity, how do we see more balancing between clients, like controlling the Beacon chain? And thoughts of dank charting as well, if you have any.
So on the client diversity thing, I think education is really going to be very important. Like letting people know what the stakes are when they join a client that has a super majority, and like what would actually happen in that case. So I think people will kind of naturally just spread out to these different clients. I think each client kind of has their own niche and their own value to give. And for us, I mean, ChainSafe is not going to stop supporting Lodestar anytime soon. So you can try us out. We're kind of the newcomers on the block. So.
Okay, so Prysmatic Labs has the Prism client, and the data is showing that Prism is a supermajority client. And from Prysmatic Labs side, we always wanted people to use our client, but never to this degree. We agree this is dangerous. And with client diversity, I think this is like mostly a social communication, and what we need to communicate to people is like, what are the barriers to switching? And I think a lot of people are realizing the risk of switching is inherent, and they have to understand that the risk of not switching may be greater, right? So Prism does a great job of stopping the bugs, but we're human, right? So it could happen. And understanding the consequences of a critical bug in Prism should be enough for the average user to say, okay, well, I'm going to switch to Nimbus or Lodestar or Lighthouse or Teku, any of these other great options. I'll go ahead and tell you that Prism, it operates just as great as any of these other clients. There is no best client. You can switch, it's easy to do, and it's really important for client diversity. I think as far as on the technical side, this is really difficult to enforce. We don't know who the actors are. We don't know what software they're running, and it's arguably impossible to do that in a trustless way. So it has to be through the social communication layer. So if you hear it now and you're running Prism, please looking at other clients.
Okay, next audience question. We've got 4 minutes. We'll see if we can get through all 3. Go.
Hi, thank you for taking questions, and this panel has been fantastic, so thank you. I'm interested in staking pools. I think that lots of folks are looking for liquid staking options, and the natural kind of first step might be an exchange, but a lot of us are concerned that maybe the exchanges will accumulate a lot of power if that's the case, if people stake through exchanges. What, in your mind, does a strong staking pool look like that lets people participate in liquid staking but kind of maintains the security and the vision of Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of interest in more decentralized staking pools, right? Especially ones where you retain custody, so not going to like Coinbase or Kraken or something like this. Some big players right now. There's Lido, which there's Lido, and then also like Rocket Pool would be another one. It's certainly important. There's a ton of custody risk if you go to one of these centralized exchanges. I will say there's also a research effort in terms of we'll call it distributed validators, where you basically can maybe this is overloaded, but you can basically shard validators across multiple actors, and this is another way to think about pooling. That research is coming to production still, but hopefully it unlocks more of sort of this design space.
Thank you.
Come on up. 3 minutes.
Hi, I'll keep this short and sweet. What's happening with EWASM? I hope that's relevant for this discussion. I'm curious.
You said what's happening with EWASM?
Yeah.
So everyone's using the EVM. I don't know. There was a lot of research that went into EWASM, and essentially what happened was we saw that essentially it doesn't gain us that much beyond just investing in the EVM. And at this point, there's so much tooling built on top of the EVM, and even last year or two, right? We now have other chains that are also adopting the EVM, so it's becoming this very enshrined thing. That's not to say that we shouldn't have experimentation with different virtual machines, right? And this is again where rollups come into play, and it's very exciting to see different execution models there. Arbitrum, for example, is moving to WebAssembly as their L2 VM. So yeah, the future is layer 2.
Okay, last question.
Thank you. So as we move to, as we go from POW to more of a POS, obviously there's a lot of compute need. You mentioned data centers now. As it becomes more distributed, is there still a need for compute at the edge, or does that go to a person's home on the node, or what is the distributed compute need as we move forward?
I know that there's already kind of a culture of people home staking. So if on Ethereum, there's the ETH Staker subreddit. They basically try to get people to just be comfortable enough and be educated enough to be able to run their own node at home, and it's definitely possible. You can do it on a kind of a normal consumer computer.
Thank you 3 so much for your insight on what we can look forward to this year. Thank you everyone for your questions and your time. See ya.